Hopefully things will turn around. From January to June, this would be a return to the in-person model, maintaining distance learning. We've heard from families until there's a vaccine that's widely available and spread, they're not going to feel safe bringing their kids back at all. And so having that as an opportunity, and then continuing to monitor data and adjust on the ground based on health professional guidance. So there could be a time where we bring everyone back and then there's a sudden outbreak at either one of our schools or multiple schools that we would have to shut down again. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, but that is a possibility and we would be prepared to do that. So for us, the phased model has different checkpoints. It very much is allows us to be more fluid and make decisions based on the data on the ground. And we'll continue to monitor and work with our health professionals to help us and continue to follow all the guidance that is needed. And that, is changing. So I will say the governor came out yesterday and basically gave the guidance that we had already adopted, right? Which is if a county is on the watch list, then all schools within that county must open as a distance learning option. So we already decided to open as distance learning, and then the governor gave his guidance. What that means, because there's 30 something counties on the current watch list, that over 80% of students in California will open in distance learning per the governor's mandate. There's about 20% are in districts and counties that can make that local decision, whether they want to or not, or whether they feel it's safe or not. It's a local decision. To come off the county list, the state watch list, there has to be 14, you have to be achieve low positivity rate, a number of other things over a 14-day period. At that point, we would have the option as a local agency to begin bringing school students back in a hybrid model. But again, that would be a local decision. So with that, I will stop. I know we got a lot of educators on the call, so I know there'll be a lot of difficult questions, which I'll do my best, and Rebecca's here also to help.
Thank you. And that was PK Diffenbaugh, our Monterey Peninsula Unified School District Superintendent. PK, how long have you been on that job?
So I'm entering my 7th year. So the superintendent years, I'm in my 49th year.
That's wild. 49 years. You don't even look 49 years old. You must have started when you were like, under 10.
Yeah.
And we introduced Rebecca as a principal at Marina High School. Since then, Aaron Wood, who's an employee with Monterey Peninsula Unified School District with us, and we already mentioned Tom and Wendy, our two trustees representing Marina on the school board. Anybody else on here that's Aaron Frazier, I think, is a retired Monterey High School teacher. I know he taught, among other things, photography. Hello, James. Anybody else that I'd like to recognize that's an employee in the school district? Okay, well, let's get then to questions. And the first one, go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. A question that we were formulating a few weeks back was, for some children, so sadly, the safest part of their day is the day they're at school, the time during the day they're at school. And there are trusted adults where they can come and say they need help with their home life. And so do you have a plan in place for helping those children be able to safely reach out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a big worry, I think, from educators across the country. We actually saw calls about child abuse go plummet, right? Which is not, you would think is a good thing, but really means that, kids aren't being able to reach out to a trusted adult when they're in danger. We do have some ideas about how to do that. So one would be this kind of student support hubs on campus, where we can bring smaller numbers of kids onto campus who are our most vulnerable students, in order to provide them with more consistent adult supervision, care, support. The second is partnering with community-based organizations to be able to have our kids go to their sites during the day. So we're partnering with Boys and Girls Club, for example. We've City of Seaside's going to run something. We've reached out City of Marina, also YMCA and CPY. So we do think we're going to be able to bring a number of students to a location where they do have a caring adult in a consistent way, in order to reach out in a safe way, 6 feet apart, etc. The challenge is, as I mentioned, so many of our kids are in that position where they need more stability than they're getting. And, so even if we pull this off for, like, let's say 400 kids, which would be amazing, right? We have 1,600 McKinney-Vento students, right? We have even more that we have, around 70% of our kids qualify for free reduced lunch, which we will keep our free lunch program going. But, just give a sense of, that when you get to know our kids, you really see the challenges they're facing and what they're overcoming, and the support that they need. So we do have some things in place, but if you are asking, am I worried about it? Yes, I'm definitely worried about it. It is a difficult time for a lot of folks. And I think the trauma that many of our kids experienced, I can only imagine, has been exacerbated by now food insecurity, housing insecurity, their parents being laid off, etc. So it's a difficult time for many of our families.
Hello. Yes, I'm Christopher Gonzalez. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Yes. Yes. Interesting question about the sort of the hybrid based learning, with both going online and going to school. Interesting question about that.
Yeah.
Most of the issues that I can see, there's there's always Wi-Fi out here in the area of Marina, especially going towards Seaside and Monterey. Yes, it does get a little slow in Seaside, but do you think that that basically the online model would work out a little better, because basically most people are going online already and probably already have internet connection right now, so there's basically nothing to do outside of the home? But wouldn't it be better just to either give the students the choice to either go online, and if they could go online, they go online, or do the hybrid model, which I highly recommend right now, because that would work out better, because you go online, you guys already have the technology there to do so.
Yeah.
But if first you ask me, you should probably wait before people go back to school, before they because how kids are. Their hands always dirty. So the one thing is I'm trying to figure out right now is, should we go the online route for a lot more? Because that would work out a lot better. Because there's plenty of places outside, like with the let's say parks, Starbucks, all kinds of places have free Wi-Fi. So why don't we just use that or is this to do so? Because all you just need is either the URL going to the website to help you out to go with the class. Would that work out better? Yes.
Yeah. So I think for the start, we're definitely starting with the distance learning, with the online learning. That's how we're going to start, and we'll move towards a hybrid model when the conditions on the ground warrant it. But we will still have a distance learning model available for choice. So some families, some students will choose to stay on in the distance learning, and we'll still have that model as a choice. But you're absolutely right that Wi-Fi and connectivity is certainly a concern that we have. We need to make sure happens, and then hygiene and cleanliness definitely when we move to the hybrid model, or anytime we're bringing students back, we're going to have to make sure that we have routines in place so that they're keeping their hands and clean.
Bruce, you're muted.
All right. I wanted to say thank you to Chris Wilmot. He's a graduate of our community, our Marina community learning community. And so thanks, Chris, for being with us, and PK for answering that. And Enid, when you get started, do you want to mention to us your children's situation, you know, what schools or ages you have?
Sure. My name's Enid Rice. I have a middle schooler who's homeschooling right now. And then I have a first grader who's starting at Crumpton this year. So two big, intense ages. I wanted to say first, just thank you to PK and to all the teachers and staff members and principals. Like, you guys have just been doing such an amazing job, and your plan is so good and your communication is so good, and I'm just so grateful to you all.
Thank
and
you.
I love that you're giving childcare to your staff also. That's just incredible. I just had a couple of questions based on, I'm a college professor. I teach at CSUMB, and we also like had this emergency teach online situation, and I'd never done it before. It was really scary. And a couple of things that I'm thinking about going in. One is that I think we're learning that Zoom causes fatigue. We know for adults, you know, they're starting to say like, oh, about 40 minutes, you get kind of fatigued. I don't think they've studied young people as much. I'm trying to design classes where we do these chunks of like 20 to 40 minutes, and then we're off doing something, and then we come back, and it's supposed to be a 4-hour class, but you know, I just think it's going to be more effective for my time, their time. And the other question I had is because I saw the sort of dummy schedule, and it was like 90 minutes, and I thought, because I was helping a kindergarten this year,
Right.
and the kids were on for an hour, and it was like, and then the second question was about something that we do kind of have data on, which is that it's good for kids to get to sleep in, and you know, we start school early for a variety of reasons, you know, that have to do with like the workday and things like that. But I'm wondering if it's like just trying to find the silver linings of some of this stuff, like if we can let them sleep in, or they start a little later. Like, I have an 8 o'clock class coming up, and there's freshmen in there, and they're still teenagers, and I'm definitely not starting at 8 a.m. We're starting at 10.
Right. Yeah. So your first question or point is really well taken. I think we're all learning, you know, how to adopt to Zoom pedagogy, you know, and I think depending on the age level, you know, it's different in terms of the ability, and I do think there's a lot of tools that you can do that can make it more interactive, differentiate, and make it, you know, a little bit better than just sitting behind a screen, right? So I don't know if you know Pear Deck, but that's one. There's a few other apps you can apply. But I think that our teachers are learning, you know, what's working, what's not working, and it will somewhat be a continuous learning process. You know, in terms of the later start day, so one is it's coming, right? So the state passed a law that said high schools will not start earlier than 8:30. I think by 2023, I think. So it's coming, but there's a kind of a phase-in model. And you just would be surprised how many things need to fall in line when you're trying to change a start date. You know, so there's obviously collective bargaining issues, but then there's also transportation and the impact on transportation, which I get in this environment, maybe not as much. So I don't know if we're going to be able, given everything that we're trying to lift off the ground, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that this year, but it is coming for sure in the future.
Thanks, Enid. Good questions. Thank you, PK. All right, to our star volunteer, Jeff Uchida.
I just said unmute. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good evening,
Okay.
Jeff.
First of all, PK, I think you're doing an awesome job, and a lot of thoughts gone into this. One thing that I am keenly aware of is sports in the schools. And I saw something that just came out. I think the CIF came out with something. Are you guys going to be following then the CIF protocols?
Yeah. So, what CIF essentially said today was that fall sports will be moved to winter at the earliest, I think, in December start. So I think the CCS is still meeting on it and is still I want to wait to hear their guidance, but my guess is yes, that we'll probably follow that lead. Now, I do think there's ways that you can still keep kids physically active and keep engaged. That I'm hopeful that we can figure out a way, because I know sports is so important to so many kids. It's the reason why many kids, come to school or stay in school. And so I don't think we can just say, okay, everything is just blank until December. But we're going to have to find some safe ways to make that happen, whether it's this pod idea, where you only have a certain group of kids who are always together. I think Palma football had started that. So there could be some ways to do it, or whether it's, some social distancing workouts, those types of things. So we need some more guidance on it, but I think it's really important that we find a way to keep some sports, some physical activity going, and some connection between coaches and students, because it's so important for kids.
Yeah, and I think the young people need to hear that too. That there will be something, hopefully, as everything pans out. One other thing, PK, is to utilize possibly Saturday as another option to not Saturday school, but offering some other. Just expanding the normal operations of schools.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. I think we've kicked around that and other things. I think the more we can engage our community partners to do some things, the more creative we can be, right? So I don't think we can ask teachers, hey, we add a Saturday to your week type of thing, given everything that they do every
But again,
week.
it could be a thing where the teacher actually made a little bit more money too, though.
Yeah, and we do during the regular school year. We do have Saturday Academy, which does allow teachers to make some extra money, and so we're thinking about how do we do that in a virtual environment. For me, I would really want to structure it around something fun, enjoyable, creative, where kids are really looking forward to it, type of thing. But yeah, I think that's definitely an option.
Anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. And wanted to give a shout out to Sheila Olson. She was with us since the beginning tonight. She owns a hairstyling business in Marina. And to Quinn, he's patiently listening with his mom, Wendy. Hello, Quinn. And we're going to go to Danielle next. And Danielle was the mastermind of tonight's topic. So thank you, Danielle, for suggesting what we're doing.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us, as well as for all the hard work you've been doing.
All right, hang on a minute, Danielle. You sound like Darth Vader. So the connection is poor, but let's give it another shot at it.
Now, is that any better?
No, it's not working. It sounds awful, very scratchy.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. So I just wanted to thank you for coming, as well as thank you for all the hard work you've been doing, this enormous amount of labor and being so safety minded. I have 3 different questions. They're each a little unrelated to each other. The first one was, you mentioned the idea of needing rapid test results and access to health professionals, and I was just curious how that looks, for whether those are things that will be in place by October. So that was my first question. My second one was whether you're offering flexibility to staff that are uncomfortable returning in person when hybrid comes back. And then third was just, I guess, kind of a comment worrying about the teachers being a vector and switching classes creating more vectors for potential disease, and wondering if that hybrid approach and teachers having to teach in person at the same time as teaching online, if that's how it's going to go, if that's really worth that risk.
All right, Danielle, PK had technical difficulties, so he dropped out for a minute. So let's bring him back, and why don't we take your questions one at a time, because I don't think he's been able to hear them. But let's just go one at a time. We'll get a Q&A one at a time.
Awesome. So my first one was, you had mentioned earlier the idea of needing rapid test results and needing access to health professionals to be safely moving back into the hybrid mode. And I was curious if those are something that are in the works at the local level, and will they be ready by October?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had the answer. I think certainly the communication is something that we can better create, kind of the direct line to people who can give us answers. And so we're working with the health director on how to structure that. So that I think we can take care of. The testing is something that I just can't understand how as a country we're in the position that we're in. And so I just don't know enough about why we're where we are. I think that in March we could have said every school will be able to test anyone and get a 24-hour response, and we're willing to spend $1 trillion or however much it takes for that to happen, and we could have done it. The fact that we're still 14, 15 days, I just don't know what needs to happen to improve that, and I feel a little helpless in that regard.
All right, hope we didn't, Danielle, get you back on here for your second question.
So just as a quick follow-up to that one, does that mean that that October goal is going to push through even if we have slow testing? Or does that mean that it will not go to hybrid until that rapid testing is available?
Yeah, I think if rapid testing is not available, it's going to be really hard to open up, because what's going to happen is school, classroom by classroom, you're going to have to shut down again when someone needs to test or when a kid needs to test, and you're not going to get a response time back. So I don't know if 24 hours is the right number. It may be 48, but to me, if it takes 2 weeks to get a test result, it's going to be really hard to open back up again.
My second question was about whether you are offering staff any flexibility if they're uncomfortable returning to the hybrid and in-person models.
Yeah, so we do anticipate that there will be, by our survey, about 25% of our parents responded that they would stay in distance learning, even if the hybrid was available. So I do think that there will be a number of distance learning only teaching positions to be able to support those students. I don't know how many that will be, and so I think that they will be available, but it depends on student need, how many, and then how many teachers volunteer for that.
And how would that work, PK, for the teachers? If I'm a teacher and I'm uncomfortable, will I have flexibility in teaching distance learning 100%?
So I think what I would say is you would be able to put your name in as a, hey, I'm interested in distance learning. And then depending on how many students needed it, that would be determine kind of how many teachers come off the list.
So it's not a blanket flexibility. We'll find a way if you don't feel comfortable coming to school.
No, it is not that.
And does high risk status factor in to that?
Yes, absolutely. So the high risk factor would lead to you being the first selected off of that list.
High risk of the staff or staff and their family members?
I think so. Well, I will say this all of that still needs to be worked out, but I think it would start with high risk of staff first.
And then I guess just my third question was half question, half comment. knowing that when they return to hybrid models, their teachers are going to be asked to potentially teach online and in person at the same time. Is that right? Would they have their online students would still be, Zooming in or something? And so that seems like a really difficult pedagogy for teachers to be asked to do. And of course, with a mask on and trying to police all this behavior. And also with kind of switching classes, the teacher is a vector between your AA, BB students, and every student is a vector as they switch all these classes. I'm just curious if that hybrid model is really worth the risk, given the challenges to pedagogy and the health risks that it brings, as opposed to waiting until you can really be fully in person.
So, yeah, I think that's a good question. The other thing I'm worried about the hybrid model is 3 days a week, kids are not at school, right? And so at school, you can keep them, at least at the elementary level, as their own cohort, right? And the whole idea is to cohort kids as much as possible. But outside of school, if families are working, what do you do with your kids? Well, they start going to friends, they start going to relatives, they start going to the park, they start, and then kind of all the work you're doing to kind of cohort kids, I think, kind of dissipates when you're away. So I think that's another challenge. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a bounce between, it's kind of like the balance is, the everything you described with the knowledge that we know that if kids aren't in school, that does have life impacts for many kids, right? And those are real. Those aren't, I'm not going to get a better job. It's like, I'm not going to live as long if I don't if I miss a certain amount of school, right? And so I think it's trying to balance that, but hybrid would be a tough model to do. I think another thing that I think we could do, we're willing to spend $1 trillion to keep small businesses open. But we're not willing to, if they gave you twice as much money for a school, you could hire twice as many teachers, right? And keep the class sizes down and bring everyone back at the same time, right? You'd probably have to have a lot of tents and space would be a lot of issues, but you could do it. It is possible. But again, it's not financially, at least now, not viable, and it's not it doesn't seem to be a priority of our nation. So I think you got to weigh the hybrid ones, and how effective is distance learning. I think that we're learning, we're getting better, and as that gets more and more effective, then maybe you don't take that risk the way because of what you described. So I think there's a lot of factors to consider on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. And before we go to Brian, who was going to be our next questionnaire, I wanted to segue, because you kind of started this a little bit, PK and Danielle, with a conversation with Grace Silva Santella and you, PK, about outdoor classrooms. Grace, do you want to give your sense of questions that you were talking? You're muted right now, but we'll unmute you. Go ahead.
But Bruce, I have other questions too, so I'll just ask this one at this one point.
Okay.
So PK, I've been reading a few different periodicals speaking of outdoor classrooms. And I work outside for a living, so I know I am in a much safer environment for the COVID-19. Despite the fact that when my employee and I are within 6 or 8 feet of each other, we are always wearing masks, even though we're working outside in the garden. What's the viability of outdoor classrooms? And if outdoor classrooms are viable, this is a second part of a question, but it would tie into this. The bond measure that passed a few years ago, can any of the money from that bond be used to improve, to provide for outdoor classrooms and improve the rooms that we currently have for ventilation, etc.? Thank you.
Sure. So one, you may have saw KSBW did a story on Mount Madonna School, which is going to move all outside. I went, my mom started that school. That's the school I went to. But they're in the mountain, the Redwood Mountains, 30, a lot of acres, etc. But I do think it's viable. We ordered some tents, to place outside to be able to have that as an option, kind of as for some students, so rotation. So I think that it is possible, but I just think that kind of, it's not just about moving kids outside, right? There's, I think, an approach towards learning that would have to change, right? And the physical environment has to change. Pedagogy might have to change. Even the curriculum might have to change. So I do think it's viable, but I just think it's a lot, to take on. So kind of as an initial step, we've ordered some kind of, covers and tents and things. We also have, some of our classroom sites, so schools have different benches and stools and stuff you could bring and make a classroom type thing. We've talked at Monterey High School about does music move outside on the bleachers, where they have a lot of space. So I do think there's options to move outside. But I think in terms of a full outside classroom, I think you'd really have to have kind of the teacher buy-in, the principal buy-in, the parent buy-in to really kind of make it a full approach. That I'm not sure we're there yet. In terms of the bond, certainly in terms of inside the classroom, yes, and we have been doing that. We've been replacing HVAC units all across the sites. So in Marina, Los Arboles did it. Marina, Del Mar preschool has a new units in there. Marina High School. So we've replaced all of those. Crumpton and Marina Vista have already had those replaced, and Olson, I believe, too. So we've already spent money on that. In terms of outside classroom, I'd have to look into the bond language. If the bond language that the voters voted on said something to that effect, then yes, we can. It has to be in the language of the bond. So I do think if it's a classroom, if it's structural, I'm not sure if it was just more like landscaping type stuff, if that would qualify or not. I'd have to check the language of the bond, but I do think it would be possible to spend money on that.
And PK, you mentioned short term, like I'm thinking of pop-up tents or whatever it is, the minimal kind of classroom structure. At what point do you have to get the state architect to approve it?
Right. That's exactly right. So we have these pop-up tents, the little, smaller. I mean, they're bigger than, little, but they're not huge. But yeah, once you start to try to get into like a big tent, like we looked into asking Pebble Beach Company, because they have those big tents for golf tournaments and stuff like that.
They're not using them.
Right. So, that possibility, but that's when you start to get into that size, that's when you have to get the right permits and stuff, because the state has to ensure that that's, a safe structure for kids.
But not for the smaller pop-ups that you've already ordered.
Correct. That's my understanding. Someone could tell me I'm wrong, but I think they're small enough that they'd be able to use. And we were thinking it more like as some kids might be outside the tent, some kids might be in the tent, kind of maybe a rotation outside model where there's different things going on outside. So maybe they're, gardening in one location, maybe they're drawing under the tent, so maybe they're doing a science experiment, that type of thing. So it wasn't intended to be, give us some options.
Okay, you froze up a little bit, maybe just on my end, I'm not sure, but let's go to Brian. Thanks, PK and Grace. We'll come back to Grace.
Thank you, Mayor. PK and Rebecca, good evening. I'm going to try to keep my question very simple and non-political. Tomorrow, the city of Marina is going to be discussing the cannabis ordinance, and I was really shocked to learn that over 40% of MPUSD 11th graders have used cannabis at least once in their life, with about a quarter reporting use more than 7 times. What can you say about how accurate these statistics might be and how serious the problem of drug use and vaping is at our local schools?
I'll let Rebecca talk more specific because she deals with it every day. But I would say that certainly it is a huge issue, particularly vaping. It is, and not just in MPUSD. I think across the country. One study I saw said that 30% of teenagers have vaped within the last few months. So I think it is a huge issue, and what the statistics you mentioned I think are probably accurate.
And I have to agree with the legalization of marijuana. We're seeing more and more scholars trying it. I've been in MPUSD for 20 plus years. And during that time, what I've noticed is that if kids were bringing alcohol or marijuana onto campus, it was because they had done it enough offside of campus and they felt comfortable in bringing it on. And we didn't have as much of an issue as we do now because it's so much easier for the scholars to get a hold of it. And they're not as fearful of it as the way that they used to, and that it's legalized. I think it's something that we need to continue working on. We try not to just give a scholar a consequence when they get caught with marijuana or any type of substance, which we try to support them in another way to do some counseling on why are you making these choices. And we have programs that we're using on campus for that. We also have our community liaisons and our campus monitors and our mental health therapists that work with scholars that are struggling with substance use.
Yeah, I would just add, just real briefly, I think it used to be have to bring a school and you would smell at least when I was a principal, I could smell the kids' hands. I knew what was happening. Now with vaping, it's just a little cartridge. You put it in your thing and you're spewing out what smells like perfume or whatever. So I think it's just the vaping has really changed the game, in my view, in terms of marijuana use and just the frequency that it's brought on campus. And then secondly, again, I don't think, to me, it's not like the local cannabis shops. It's that kids can order it online and it shows up and it drops off on your desk, on your doorstep, and no one asks if you're 18 or whatever. So I think that the availability of it without having to have your, age is another factor. So those two things have really made a big difference. I mean, yeah.
And how has it affected student performance or behavior, if you've noticed?
The obvious, much more sluggish in class, loss of motivation, not for everybody, but that's the biggest thing. Or a scholar will tell you, I have anxiety or I get nervous before school. So I smoke before I get to school, and then maybe once during the day or after school for those reasons. But definitely lack of motivation and sluggish.
Thank you. Brian, did you have any more? Okay. All right, Danielle.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question to, I think was my third question earlier, related to kind of some of the decisions in coming back to in-person. And I don't know if you've seen this very recent study. I think it came out just a couple of days ago about a difference in likelihood in that older students are much, much more likely than younger students to transmit COVID, even as much as, if not more than adults can. Of course, they are non-cohorted as they switch teachers throughout the day, and they are more able than younger students to be home alone without supervision. And so my question is, are your decisions about reopening going to differ by grade because of these differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that yes, I think they will differ by grade, and I think that we're really looking for the health department to give us better guidance on that, right? Like if the health director says don't bring high schoolers back because it's not safe enough, we won't bring them back, absolutely not. I think what's hard is when it's like, you superintendent, you decide what's the risk. You decide how that study compares to the other study, and it falls on a non-health professional to make that call. That's what makes it really hard. So I think we would engage with our health director or health department to really help give us some guidance. But I could see a situation where, K through 2 is coming back in small groups every day, and older kids are not. So I think that definitely is a possibility in terms of the high, and certainly the guidance from the state is in terms of masks is 3rd grade and up, you have to wear a mask. Below, you can suggest it or recommend it strongly, but it's not a requirement. So I do think different age groups are going to be treated differently.
All right, thank you. And before we go to Kathy Biala, we have a few chats. I aired earlier assuming that Sheila was Sheila Olson, but it's actually Sheila Baker, and she owns the business Ambassadors. Sorry for that misunderstanding, Sheila Baker. And then we have one parent whose child is with us tonight, and that child wants us to know that the child can't wait to go back to school because it's less awful there.
Okay.
That's a compliment. It's less awful there. That's pretty good. And then Rebecca wanted to add to that the Marina High School is also receiving new windows in many classrooms, and these windows open. So that's an improvement. And then James Fraser said he just saw a coyote trotting through Harvey Court. So we've gone from coyotes to windows. It's great. All right, go ahead, Kathy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, PK and Rebecca, for being on this town hall. It's really special when we have special guests, so it's nice, and over something very important. I have 3 quick things. On the hybrid model, is that for in-person learning on site? Would that be reserved only for high-risk students? Is that, did I misunderstand that? Is that for primarily the high-risk students?
So while there's distance learning, we're bringing small onto campus for direct. So is that your question?
Yes.
So we're looking.
Whoa, I can't hear you now.
Yeah, and PK, it's I think it's on your end because you're going in and out. We may have lost PK temporarily. Rebecca, do you want to stand in? Let me try to unmute you.
Scared everybody off.
No. We just lost PK. That shows you what it's like to try to teach from home, or the whole issue is exemplified by PK. Okay, PK's back. Rebecca was gonna stand in and channel your energy. We're trying to unmute you, PK. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that we're looking for creative ways to bring smaller groups of students onto campus, and those students would be most, quote unquote, at-risk students, most marginalized students, most students that would need the extra support. So that's what we're looking at in the distance learning environment. So it could be at a certain site, there's 10 kids that come in socially distanced in the library that then get extra support from a staff member, something like that.
Now, PK, I think that also phase 1 as described earlier, was for all the kids to go 2 days distance or 2 days on campus and 3 days distance. But that was for all children.
Phase two. Yeah, that would be phase two, the hybrid
phase
model.
two.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So the hybrid model would be for all students. But the most at-risk students, they might come every day, or they might come 4 days a week, right? So instead of 2 days a week. So that would be kind of the model, is increasing the amount of time that our highest risk students get direct support and attention from our adults.
Okay, and I think that's a wonderful idea. I do know that there's some parents who work and must work, either the single parent or even two parents, and they are getting really frayed in terms of trying to figure out how to educate their kids while they're at work, if they're at home or if they've gone somewhere to work. So
Yep.
it's like those folks don't quite fit into that necessarily high risk category, but they are really concerned and they don't know how they're going to continue this. Either they lose their job and then stay home and educate and care, and this is again, the older kids can stay home, but
right,
sort of donut hole in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I that we've heard that consistently, and I think it's going to be hard. I think the difference between how it was in the spring and how we're planning to do it in the fall is in the spring, it was more asynchronistic, meaning teacher uploads assignment, student does it on their own, uploads it, teacher grades it. So in this fall, there will be a period of time where there's virtual teaching going on in real time. So I think there will be less of a heavy lift on the parents than they experienced in the spring. With that said, I think that it's going to be hard on families for sure. We're trying to partner with different groups to be able to provide some type of, we're calling it extended learning opportunities rather than childcare, but through Boys and Girls Club, through the city recs, through YMCA, can we be able to provide that? We won't be able to reach 10,000 kids, but can we reach more kids with that possibility? Is something that we're trying to do. So I think it's possible. I even called today the city of Monterey. What are you doing with your new conference center, right? They don't have a lot of visitors to the conference center. Could we use that as a childcare site and bring a lot of kids who could space out, very well there and still serve a lot of kids? So I think there's some opportunities to get creative. Obviously staffing is an issue, but we're going to try to serve as many as we can, because we know the situation you described has been described to us, and it's heartbreaking to think about, forcing a family to choose between their livelihood and their kids' education. That's a tough place to be in. So we're going to try to find solutions.
PK, I think Grace has to leave us, but might have time for a question because she had one left over. Or
yeah.
Two. Go ahead, Grace.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just had two quick questions. One is, you said that you had been asking the city of Marina for something, and I'm curious what it is that Marina was asked of. And second question is, sorry for that phone ringing, is you show 2 meetings having occurred with parents, 4 actually, 2 with English speaking and 2 with Spanish speaking. I'm curious what the turnout was for those meetings.
Sure. So your first question is about City of Marina. So we've talked about, could the teen center be one location for a extended learning opportunity, where either we staff it at the teen center or potentially staffed by rec department folks, where we could bring in kids, socially distanced, but use the teen center as kind of a location. So that's the ask, and I think ongoing discussions about how to best do that. In terms of the town halls, we did virtual town halls. We had for English, I want to say like almost 1,000 attendees, or at least 1,000 signups. I'm not sure how many ended up attending, but we had a ton.
At least 600 at the
600,
start.
yeah. So maybe that's probably better. 600, and then we had a few. I think the Spanish town hall. I think we had 150 to something like that. I think we had over 200 sign up, but I think it was about 150. More than come to meetings in person, right? So we're actually thinking that this is going to be a really good parent engagement strategy going forward, because it seems like parents will tune in, virtually rather than show up physically. So we're already planning some kind of parent education components, how to help your kid with the Google Classroom, how to speak to your kid, during traumatic times, those types of things, where we're hoping to get a better turnout based on the turnout we got for these town halls. Obviously, parents want to know what's happening with school, so maybe that's what drove the turnout. But we were pleased with the number of people. It was more than we've experienced in the past.
Thanks a lot, Grace. She's going to go to a Marina Coast Water District board meeting, probably another Zoom. Wow. Aaron Wood, I want to put you on the spot. You've kind of been hanging out there, but I kind of want to know, as a staff professional, what your experience is like, if you hear me. And if not, then I was going to ask Rebecca similar questions. But while we wait for Aaron to see if he can finish the dishes and jump on, there he is. Hey, Aaron, how are you doing?
Hi, Bruce. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Can you tell us what you do at MPUSD and what's your reality these days?
Sure. Yeah. I am the director of our multi-tiered system of support. And with that, just essentially trying to follow the lead of PK Diffenbaugh and the rest of the cabinet that's been doing a great job to set us up to support students as best we can. Just really trying to support our students that have been
you got muted. You've been muted the last 10 seconds, Aaron. That's too bad. He's saying some great stuff. I just can't hear it because he's muted. Hey, Aaron, you're muted. But PK and Rebecca and everybody, this really tells you, what happens, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to distance communication.
Right. Exactly.
I know. I think my computer has slowed down a couple times, and PK, I think a couple times you may have frozen.
Yep.
And when you're a teacher and you got, 10 or more children on the other end,
yep,
it's kind of chaotic.
Yep.
So Aaron's having technical difficulties. We can't get him unmuted. Oh, that was close, Aaron. I think we had you, and then we lost you just for a split second. There you. Well, PK, while he's still trying, did you want to wrap anything up? Oh, and Kathy, I'm sorry to cut you off. Did you have any questions left? Okay, let's go back to Kathy while Aaron tries to unmute himself.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Welcome back.
So,
thanks.
I share the same concerns with that Brian McCarthy brought up about the cannabis, the new ability to access cannabis for youth. And so I wanted to know, because we spent a lot of time, both the City Council and the Planning Commission, looking at the cannabis ordinance. And every time I talk about cannabis, I always bring up my concerns being a nurse with youth and the long-term effects of chronic use of these substances. And I was wondering, because we're looking at possible funding for prevention use for children? And does the school offer its own versions of like health ed or something like that, so that if we had some funding that it can be channeled into the schools for that kind of purpose, or some other nonprofit organization who comes into the schools and does some education around this?
Yeah, so I think to answer your question, I think from this is just my perspective, but like the train has left the station. Like whatever Marina decides, like kids can have access to they can order it online, they can get it. It's readily available. So I think that we're going to have to combat it more on the education side of the impacts and effects, and I think that's where it's hard because it's legal. Then some people say, oh, well, it's legal, so that it's not harmful, and that's not necessarily the case, right? But yes, we're starting a freshman seminar class that has integrated a health component to it, and so I think that that's one good place to start. And we plan to have substance abuse, not just marijuana, but opioids across the board, prescription drugs, those types of things. So I think that could be helpful. I also think drug and alcohol counseling, for kids who it's not just something they're trying, but they're actually addicted. I think we have a lot of kids in that category that kind of the overview isn't going to be enough, that it's going to need. And so we've partnered with Sun Street Centers, where we essentially can refer some of our students that we feel have need some serious drug and alcohol counseling, and then they'll provide that. We pay them to provide that if they don't qualify for Medicare, Medi-Cal. But I think maybe supporting more on-site drug and alcohol counseling could be something that would be helpful as well.
Thank you for that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And I want to say I'm always honored to have so many wonderful people on these meetings. And tonight, as someone mentioned, we're really appreciative to have PK. And PK, you've already been with us, and everybody's been on for an hour and a quarter. So I don't think this was as long as I expected of your time. So, feel free to say goodnight. And because I like these so much, I don't want to say goodnight yet too. So if Rebecca and Aaron are going to stay with us, I wanted to ask them some questions. We have a firefighter on the line with Ron Dunlap. I want to ask him some questions. PK, we want you to stay, but we understand if we've already overstayed our welcome. But
all right. Well, thank you, Bruce, for inviting me, and thanks for all the questions. And I say this and all the time, and I really do believe it. Marina is a special place because it cares about its kids, and I feel that in the community, and I certainly feel that from all of you. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, PK.
All right.
And that was at least a doubleheader for PK, because he was on Jane Parker's Hot Topics doing essentially the same thing, and probably had a day full of a similar type of stuff. So, all right. So Aaron, let's get back to you if we can unmute you. And if you can start by telling us what the gist of your job, what do you do, and then how is it going? How has it been affected by these changes? If we can unmute you. There you go.
All right, I think we have it. Yeah, so the gist of my job is to support our students within MPUSD that may be experiencing some of social emotional needs, and to help all of our schools across the district build capacity to support those students, and essentially really like providing supports for all students. And then when we have signs that students are in need of additional supports, then how do we put together those strategies that allow us to, as quickly and as effectively as possible, meet the needs of those students? And of course, during distance learning, that adds a layer of difficulty and extra challenges to that. But I think with the leadership of PK and the cabinet and the board, we've actually been able to do that, fairly well. We've been able to keep a lot of our regular structures in place that have allowed our teams at our schools to continue to meet the needs of our students.
Great, Aaron. Well, thank you for your dedication to the students and for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I can almost see your house from here.
Yeah.
Aaron lives across the street. All right, thank you very much, Aaron. Best wishes in this coming school year. It'll be one that you won't forget, I'm sure. Rebecca, maybe you're having a glass of wine or something, but if you can tell us, there you are. If you can tell us what's going on in your life related to school these days, it'd be great to hear from our principal at Marina High School.
Lots of work. Just like everybody else, this is completely unprecedented. Normally I would have already had the beginning of school completely laid out and would be focusing on master schedule and getting the kids into the right classes. And we're continuing to focus on that. But, we continue to wait to get direction from the district and the county and the state. So Tanny and I are, Alex Tanny is the assistant principal. We're just working very, very hard and strong to make sure we have an incredible kickoff to the school year, whatever it may look like.
What's your stress level like? Is it higher than usual at this time of year?
No. I don't know why. For some reason, I feel pretty level-headed right now. I know that when we went into distance learning in the spring, Tanny and I worked all of spring break, the 2 weeks, and we had an incredible kickoff. I think our school had one of the stronger kickoffs in the district. And so I'm feeling really confident, having been a principal for many years. I feel like we can go with any flow that comes our way, which is kind of really nice. And we have amazing staff that is ready to do whatever needs to be done. And our scholars are amazing, and they make everything we do worth it, because they always are so appreciative and so supportive themselves.
What kind of interaction do you think you'll have with your students this year in person? Let's say in this first phase one, where it's all distance learning, but so in your life, what kind of physical interaction will you have with the scholars?
Yeah, it's definitely, I always called myself a recluse. And then when we went into the shelter in place, I realized I'm not a recluse. I'm much more social than I realized. So I really miss the social interactions with the scholars and the staff, the community and the families. And so I'm hoping to see them as much as I possibly can. I've seen a couple already, but doing the social distancing and trying to figure it out in the office, we're making do with that. But something that Tanny and I do is in the spring, we made weekly videos of what had happened the week prior, what to look forward to in the upcoming week, and just exciting things. Tanny always had his baby on the video. I had my family and my dogs. So we tried to keep that connection. We also started a Google Classroom for administrators where the entire school was invited, scholars and staff. And so they would post questions, and Tanny and I would make sure we checked the questions at least every 24 hours. And we would jump into virtual meetings with the counselors or with teachers when they were meeting with their classes, just to say hi. So we're trying to do as much of that as possible to keep that energy going. Tanny and I are also planning on having family nights, because in the fall we're not going to be having as many sporting events or any sporting events or activities that we used to do. So we're planning on having virtual family nights where we can do some type of a Jeopardy game, watching a movie, just trying to continue to keep that engagement going, as well as keep our clubs on campus going, and working that out with the staff.
Have you been able to keep all of your teaching staff, or does the anxiety and family circumstance, has that required some to resign or retire early? Or
we haven't had any of that yet. I'm hopefully not going to be seeing that. So we're, everyone's plugging along. Of course, there's the nerves. We've been having really healthy, open, candid conversations with the teachers and, just working with everyone to be empathetic and be as supportive as possible.
All right. Do you see a divide between some parents that can roll with this and some parents that are expressing that it's just too much for them with childcare and home time and work and all that?
I haven't, but I also believe that that's because it's a high school. I've received more phone calls and more emails coming to me before the district actually made the decision to go to the distance learning, requesting it, saying we're not ready to send our kids to school. What's the distance learning option going to be? But again, I believe it's because it's the high school, and they're coming in at 14, 15, so they are able to stay at home. So I think
they're more at risk of catching it, spreading it, et cetera, the older they are.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right. Did you have very many parents say, if you're going to force my kid to wear a mask, then he's not coming to school?
I haven't had that yet from anybody. And I think it's because we haven't had to have that conversation where we're forcing anybody yet, because we're continuing with the distance learning. That may change. I know that personally, we had that interaction with one other family, and I was very taken back. We haven't had anyone in our car besides one other non-Tyson person during this entire pandemic or in our home. And one of my daughter's friends asked us if we could bring her home from the ranch that day. And I told my daughter, that's fine. She has to wear a mask. And her family got very, very upset of me for putting my points of view into their family. Her daughter would not be wearing a mask, but it was a non-Marina student. It was someone from Carmel Valley. But that's the only time I've ever had any resistance. But I was taken back, considering it was my family's safety to have her in my car. So
right. Well, Monterey County Superintendent of Schools Deneen Gus was saying on a Zoom meeting that there was quite a number of parents that did not want to have their children wear masks. So it's like they're stuck in the middle, because some parents are saying, my kids won't go unless everyone's masked up. And some parents are saying, my kids won't go if they have to wear a mask. So what do the administrators do? They're really caught in the middle.
Yeah. Luckily, we haven't had that yet.
Okay. Rebecca, anything else that you want to say? I was kind of picking at things that I thought would be interesting, but anything else that you want to say about your experience?
No, I appreciate this platform. I appreciate PK's guidance and support, and his willingness to take a step back to make informed decisions. It's just so difficult to be in this position right now. Hearing from families, and the social emotional is a big concern for me with our scholars, especially being teenagers needing that social interaction. But Tanny and I are on campus every day. Can always call us. We're here to support. We'll answer any questions that you have. And I also support you if you hear something that we could be doing better. Constructive criticism is also welcome, because we want to do the best job that we can, but it's our first rodeo in going through a pandemic as well. But thank you very much for having us.
Thanks. You've always done such a great job, Rebecca, and you're just continuing on. It's great. But how's your board? Are they holding up to all this? Are they stepping up to the plate? And especially like your board president, are they chipping in? They're doing their share?
Jennings guy, I'm not quite sure about that, man. Just kidding, Tom. Is he punching me?
No.
No, I will say that the board is really supportive. And again, they're making really informed decisions and not just jumping at it to go. And that's what's going to get us through this safely. That's obviously the number one is safety.
Okay. Well, let's go to Wendy and Tom if you'd like. Just give us a little bit about your experience.
And I think I'm going to step off just because I'm still at school, so I'm looking to drive home, which can take 20 to 30 minutes. So.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Hope you get to be a recluse as long as you need it.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks for everything, Rebecca. So Tom or Wendy, let's get you unmuted and you can kind of share the time and tell us whatever you want to tell us about how this is affecting you as board members and what it's like.
Well, Bruce, I'll start. It's been some of the toughest decisions that I've had to make, and to use and really study the science has just been amazing to me to ensure that I'm making informed decisions. I mean, that's the best thing that I think I can do at this point, is to study the science and listen to others that are way smarter than me. And I appreciate all of their input and work that they do to inform me, so I know pretty much what's happening.
And Tom, you're the board president and you represent Marina on the board, right?
Correct, yeah.
Does the president, during this pandemic, are you doing anything different than the other board members?
Well, I go to, the only thing different that I do that I don't feel that's placing me at risk is, though obviously I still work full time. I've been working through this whole thing, being an essential worker. Also, I continue to go to the boardroom for the meetings to ensure that, me being the spokesman basically for our board, that there is somebody that's there that's ensuring that the information gets out.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Wendy, what would you like to tell us? What your experience has been like? How it's changed due to COVID? What this school year seems like to you compared to the previous school years?
I mean, we've talked a little bit, and over the past couple months, and this is just really hard for everybody, and the decisions that are being made are so far from any good options that the impacts, we're really talking on some level about harm reduction when we're making decisions right now, and doing so, I'll be honest, without really clear guidance. MPUSD went out ahead of where the governor was. We didn't know that the governor was going to come out with the directive that he did. And we voted not to pursue on-campus learning for the reasons that PK outlined earlier. The week before we made that decision, there had been a staff recommendation based on the task force that spent hours and hours and hours meeting with staff, talking to teachers, talking to parents, looking at the data, looking at the recommendations from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. And, they came back with a recommendation to come back on campus. And as we sat and looked at what assumptions were embedded into those recommendations, to realize that the assumption that testing was widespread available was not accurate. We couldn't proceed with those assumptions that were sort of embedded into all of the recommendations. The board had a really difficult meeting where we had to acknowledge that some of these things are out of our control, and that our job is to keep our teachers and physically keep our teachers and our students safe. And what that meant was that in the absence of access to immediate health directed official guidance, and in the absence of testing that was available to us, we couldn't in good conscience bring everyone back onto campus. So it's like I said, these are just really hard choices that are being made at the city council, that are being made at school districts, that are being made all over the place. And personally, I'm talking to a lot of parents and listening to the realities that they're facing. And I've never in my life felt more privileged that I have options available to me to keep, my son home, that I'm working in this office. I'm here with Zoom on literally all day, every day. And there are literally the majority of our families do not have that available as an option. The majority of our families, don't have the ability to say, of course, I'm going to keep my child home and I'm going to work full time from home and I have flexibility. And we have so many families who are making the choice right now. Do I quit my low-paying job because it's cheaper for me to quit my job than to hire childcare or to put my child in childcare that feels unsafe? And we have so many more parents who are looking around saying, I don't qualify for any kind of unemployment because of their documentation status. And so really their question is, do I leave my 6-year-old at home alone again, like I did in the spring? There really are some very real ramifications to the decisions that are being made. So it weighs really heavy on me.
Right. Well, and even more tragically, perhaps, what's your sense about those families where the children are not living with either of their biological parents? Isn't everything you just mentioned sort of amplified?
This amplifies, I think, all of the disparities that existed in our community before COVID arrived. There's, and I'm sure Bruce, I think maybe you shared it with me a long time ago, was this unofficial statistic that 40% of Marina children do not live with either of their primary parents. I did sort of an informal calculation of just the kids on our street, and like it adds up. And the resources available to those families, are limited. It's not like you're able to just suddenly start collecting on public assistance when you're not even officially a caregiver or a guardian of a child. So, I mean, there really are huge impacts to our children, to our families. And we're going to have to, I believe, honestly, that we're going to have to figure out as a state and as a country what actions we're going to take to care for families in the coming year. The status quo, the way things are right now, like it can't continue like this. Something's going to have to shift.
Shifting to national politics, what's MPUSD board and staff, administration at least, and Aaron, you too, what do you all think about the potential that Congress might pass a bill if you don't open your schools brick and mortar, you don't get, funding that I think most of it you spend on special education, but what do you think about that potential?
I believe that November will demonstrate a change in leadership, and we're not gonna cross that bridge. I don't know what else to tell you, Bruce. I think those are things that we're gonna have aggressive advocacy at. We're already advocating at both the state and federal levels for the funding that we need to maintain schools. And I'll mention too that the advocacy, there was originally at the beginning of this a proposal that came out of the state saying that they were going to cut all education budgets by 10%. So for MPUSD, that would have been approximately a $10 million reduction in our budget this year while we're trying to respond to this crisis. And people rose up, our teachers rose up, our community rose up, our advocacy groups rose up and said, no, that's not happening right now. And the state changed its budget proposal. So we are fully funded at a status quo level for this year, knowing that there are cuts coming. The California economy is suffering, and that suffering will ultimately play out in our school budgets. But for right now, the advocacy worked.
Now, at federal level, if before November, let's say in the next 2 weeks, the feds were to cut funding to school districts like MPUSD that are not brick and mortar in August to October, how much money would that be if you were to lose Fed funding?
Yeah, I don't have Tom may know better off the top of his head. I don't have our budget posted, so I wouldn't want to go out on a limb and say, but the majority of our funding for MPUSD is state dollars. We do have a couple programs that are federally funded, but I want to say it's, it's definitely less than 20% of our total budget, I'm pretty sure. And so, given the conversation that occurred at our board meeting, and given the state of California coming down to the feds and saying like, no, you're not going to do this, I think it would end up in lawsuits. It would end up in, but that's not going to change MPUS. Speaking, and again, I can't speak on the board's behalf, but I don't anticipate that would change the vote of our board at MPUSD to bring people back onto campus if it's not safe.
Okay. All right.
But it wasn't even a part of the calculation, honestly, Bruce. When we spoke, it wasn't a factor.
Okay. Well, thank you, Wendy and Tom and Aaron. Anything else that any of the three of you would like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say to Aaron, give Aaron a shout out. He's our newest District 4 Monterey County Behavioral Health Commissioner. So thank you, Aaron, for stepping up to serve and represent District 4. So for anyone who's watching, if you have issues of behavioral health questions or the county's service around that, talk to Aaron. He's going to make recommendations for budget allocations for our Mental Health Services Act funding. And then the other comment that I just wanted to make to everyone who's on the call, you know, Tom and I remain available to answer questions and just to hear your feedback. So if there are concerns that you have, if there are questions that you have, if there are specific families you're worried about, please let us know so that we can activate the county or the school district supports to check on those families. One of the things I'm really proud of in the spring was we didn't lose track of families like some of the other districts did. We were able to stay at least in contact with almost all of our MPUSD families, with principals going so far as driving out of county to drop off materials for students who were staying with other family members. So we're going to keep fighting and advocating for our kids. And if you have concerns, please let us know so that we can make sure we're raising and elevating your voice. But
Thank you,
Bruce,
Wendy.
thanks for having PK on, and it's been a good partnership with the city. We'll keep
Thank
it
you.
up.
Yeah, it was great having you all. And Aaron, thank you for volunteering to serve on the county's Behavioral Health Commission. It's great.
I'm excited about that. Thank you, Wendy, for that opportunity, and thank you, Mayor Delgado, for this. You know, for allowing us to speak tonight and be part of the community in this way. And thank you to all the community members as well.
Thanks, Aaron. All right. So Jennifer, Tom's wife, said that if those of us that aren't speaking turn off our video, it'll save bandwidth. But some of the fun, I think, is seeing people in their real life, in real motion. Here comes Quinn. If I didn't see Quinn, it wouldn't be as good of an evening. So I think we're doing okay on bandwidth. Quinn, do you have anything you want to say? Have the last word on the education piece. What's school going on? Are you looking forward to school?
What's better, homeschool or school?
School.
Why? Why is school better?
Because you can play with people.
Because you can play with friends. And what's awful about homeschool?
You can't do anything.
You can't do anything. How many hours a day do you play Minecraft?
18 hours.
So that's how it's going for us. Let me just say.
Minecraft is a tough competitor for all other optional activities. Hey, Quinn, it's good to see you. Hang in there. I hope you get back to school soon so you can play with your friends. I think that's awesome.
We just got our bikes all tuned up, so we've been taking bike rides around Marina every day. So if you see us, drive carefully.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for any parents watching, like, good luck with the whole kids at home while you're working. We're not doing it super well, but he's still growing, so something's okay.
Yeah, I think he's grown a lot in the last 6 months, huh?
3 inches in the last 3 months.
Whoa, an inch a month. I didn't know you could go that fast. I think maybe he's made out of bamboo.
He might be.
All right.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good night, Wendy. Good night, Tom, Aaron. Well, we're not going anywhere, but I think you don't have to be on the spot anymore. So does anyone have a final word they want to say about education? And then for those who are willing, we'll move on to some Black Lives Matter. I think we'll focus a little bit on the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon. And I always have to apologize for going so late, but you can tell how hard it would have been to stop a little earlier. All right, I don't see any last words. So let's just say thanks to everybody for listening in and participating. Ron Dunlap, you sure you don't want to say what's going on for you as a Marina firefighter during this school situation? And if not, then maybe you want to say something about what it's like in the fire department, you know, just in general, that's not related to school. And that's if you're available, Ron.
I'd appreciate that. I'm actually right in the middle of putting my daughter to bed and listening at the same time, though, so I might have to take a rain check on that. But I appreciate the offer.
All right, next time. Good night to your daughter and your family, Ron. All right, so let's move to the CAHOOTS, and that stands for Crisis Assistance Out on the Streets, and so it's CAHOOTS, and I just made a mistake trying to share my screen, so we'll try that one more time. That's not what I wanted. Sorry about this, King. I should be better at this by now. Well, it's not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to show you second, but we'll go first. I was going to show you a video, which is really cool, but we'll just go to this first. So Cahoots, there you have it. It's Eugene, Oregon, 31 years ago started, and it's to provide mental health first responders for illness, homelessness, addiction calls. And like I mentioned, it's crisis assistance, helping out on the streets. An initiative started in 1989. And it's been seen as a national model of how we can do things alternatively to the way we're doing them now. The teams that go out and deal with all of these suicide, welfare checks, conflict resolutions, they're basically a team of 2 or 3 people. And those consist of a medic, such as a nurse or a paramedic or an EMT. And secondly, a crisis worker who has substantial training and experience in the mental health field. A study done in 2016 by the American Journal of Preventive Medicine estimated that 20 to 50% of all fatal encounters with law enforcement involved mental illness. And that this Cahoots approach demonstrates that these fatal encounters are not inevitable. Of the 24,000 calls that the Cahoots 2-person teams have responded to without police backup was only subsequently requested in 150 of those 24,000 Cahoots calls. So that instead of police going to 24,000 calls, they ended up going to 150 of those calls. So you can imagine the cost savings. The annual budget for the Cahoots is $2.1 million. The combined budget of the 2 cities that the program was serving is about $90 million. And therefore, the Cahoots teams were taking 17% of the calls and therefore saving each year $8.5 million. So this graph here, I'm colorblind, but this lighter colored gray or whatever color that is, shows the dollars in savings in 2014, under 6 million, 2015, 7 million, 2016, 9.5, 2017, $12 million were saved. Something like $8.5 million average down here from in the year span. And then the darker bars are the budgets of the department, EPT. It's the Eugene Police Department, and their budget, you can see, is a lot higher than the Cahoots budget, which is 2.1 million. But these smaller bars show you what's being saved. So you could just put that 12 million on top of the 51 million, and that's what would have cost if everyone was doing just the police. But these are well-paid individuals, well-trained, and it's $800 per police response. So if a policeman goes out on a call, it's $800 per call. And so that's how they're coming up with these savings, because those were calls the police weren't going on. And I'm not sure how the payment of these individuals work, because if you're saving $800 per call, but you still have to pay the 2-person teams, I'm not sure what the real saving is per call. But those are details that I just haven't looked into. All right, well, I'm going to try to share my screen with a video that's really kind of gives us a better idea how it works with the people doing the work. But so I'll stop there and just ask anybody on the line if they want to talk about Cahoots or talk about how we're using police now and how we might alternate with other models such as Cahoots. And I'm just going to go ahead and unmute everybody. So go ahead, you should be all unmuted. You can unmute yourselves. Go ahead, Karen, try to unmute yourself. And while you're talking, I'm going to try to get set up to share what I was hoping to share earlier. Go ahead, Karen. You're still not. Okay. I tried to unmute everybody. There we go.
There it goes. Yeah, I wanted to add that Eugene, Oregon is the home of the University of Oregon. So it's also a major college town, the biggest college, I think, in Oregon. So that adds a whole nother layer, like Berkeley and UC Berkeley have, where you have stressed out students who are, can really be getting pushed near the edge. And so anything that the community has put in place to address that population is really important. And so my daughter went there, her dad worked at Cal, and Cal's policy, I don't know so much about the University of Oregon. Cal's policy was to hire individuals who had been students at Cal, which had been the case for her dad. So, so that they were really tuned in. The police department at Cal was really tuned into what student life, how stressful student life was. So that's probably a big part of what's going on with Cahoots as well.
Thank you. And they are also covering Springfield. They must be really close. Springfield and Eugene must be like one town. Okay, unless anyone has any burning comment at this point, raise your hand if you do. You're welcome. I'm going to move over to this 4-minute video, which I think is pretty cool. Can you all see that? Can you see that? Okay, I see Wendy thumbs up. So let's see if you can hear it. Keep your thumb up, Wendy, or bring it back up if you can hear what I'm playing. Can you hear that, Wendy? Okay. So does anyone know how to share a audio? This is an NPR interview with Ari Shapiro on Cahoots. Has anyone ever shared an audio? Okay, so that's probably beyond my ability technologically here. So what I'm going to do is the audio transcript is here. So it would have been better to hear the people talking. If you could, this is what they'd be saying. With 9/11, it's a one-size-fits-all solution from homelessness to addiction. Your finger's going down, Wendy. Does that mean you can't see what I'm talking about? Let's unmute you, Wendy. Tell me what's going on.
Enid can share. You can share audio.
How do I share audio?
We'll get her set up.
Okay, so how would I share audio? Can I just click on it? Because you see where I'm about to click right here?
Yeah, I don't know how, Bruce, but Enid Rice can help you.
Oh, Enid.
Yeah.
Where are you, Enid? Let's get Enid on. Hello, Kate. Enid, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've tried this a bunch with my students, and if you play it through the Zoom, it gets really choppy. The best thing to do is take the link to it and put it in the chat so that everyone can listen on their own and sort of give people time to listen to it.
Okay, that sounds kind of wonky too, doesn't it?
It is wonky. Or you could put the link to this in the chat and people can click on it and kind of look at it on their screen while you go through it.
So I'll definitely do that, but let's go through this together. Protesters are urging their cities to redirect some of their police budget to treating these kinds of problems. I don't think Marina would have to do that. I think we could augment our budget without taking it from the police budget to keep the police doing what they're doing, and pay a couple $100,000 a year to send a couple of professionals out. And maybe we partner with other cities so that it's a regional team. It's like a SWAT team that's going out at 2 a.m. to either Monterey or Marina. And sometimes you'd have calls back to back or simultaneous, and you'd have to have other people on call. But we need to find out, how Oregon and Springfield did it. Sorry, Eugene and Springfield, and how other cities around the nation are doing it. But I don't think it necessarily has to take money out of our police budget, because I don't think that we really can handle having fewer police on patrol than we do now. But anyway, back to the Cahoots. It's a partnership between the police and a community service called Whitebird Clinic. And they are in this video, interview, they're interviewing the clinic coordinator and one of the crisis workers who actually goes out on the team. So Ben Brubaker is the director or coordinator, and Ebony Morgan is the crisis worker. So the first question is, how do the calls from 911 get routed to this crisis team instead of to the police? And that the answer is they come into a non-emergency number, or they can come in through the 911 system, and they don't require law enforcement to respond because they don't involve a legal issue. That is, they don't involve the threat of violence, they don't involve a risk to person, and so they don't need a cop, basically. And so the medic and the crisis worker, they go out to the call, they assess the situation, they help the person in need if possible, and they get that person to the wraparound care, the higher level of care, besides, making sure they're compliant with the law or taking them in. They get them without the kind of heavy enforcement that cops sort of have to do to transport them. They're able to work around that. And so the next question is that about 20% of the 911 calls come to this CAHOOTS team, and they say it's probably a little higher than 20%, and that they do respond to back-to-back calls. And when they go on the scene, do they carry any weapons? Do they carry? Do they wear a uniform? Do they have handcuffs? And the answer is they're very casual. They carry nothing but their brain. So they have de-escalation training, but they don't have weapons, and they've never needed the weapons. How often does the situation escalate, and how often is that training not enough to handle the situation? And this is where that figure came in. We spoke earlier where they got 24,000 calls, and only 150 of those calls did they need police backup for some reason. So 150 out of 24,000. If someone could do a quick math on that and let us know what percent that is, either in the chat box or just raise your hand. Let's find out what that is. It's, I don't know, got to be less than a third of 1%, but well, something like that. We'll see. Okay, so when do they need to call the police? And they need to call the police if someone's in danger or immediate threat to others. If there's traffic involved and they can't stop the person from getting hit because they can't restrain them, they're not allowed to do that, then they have to call 911. And then they go into the cost of the program and what metrics for success do they use. And here's that $2.1 million a year. That's the cost of the program to both of these cities, Eugene and Springfield. And then what was that? The last part of that question was, what are the metrics of success? Let's see if they get to that here. They estimate, they say $15 million a year. So they're costing 2.1 million and they're saving 15 million. So that's a pretty good return. They don't talk about the metrics of success. Maybe they do that down below. They go into why they do it. And one woman says her father died during a police encounter. That was Ebony Morgan. So she's passionate about this alternative approach. And Ebony Morgan says that there's other people who have lost loved ones through police encounters. And so that's partly why this system is so much supported. In the 30 years, they've never had an injury or a death when their team was responsible for. And I think that's about it. People feel safer within their community because they know they can call for help and they're not going to have the threat of what it might be with just a stricter enforcement. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and come back to everybody. So that's the crisis intervention out on the streets, a little peek into it. Did anyone figure out what that percent was? Danielle did. 0.6%, so a little more than half of 1% of their calls did they actually need, those 24,000 calls need police backup. So let's go back to everybody. I know that was a quick look into it, but what do you all think about the CAHOOTS program, what we just heard, that kind of information we just briefly went over? Katina, I'm going to pick on you if you're still with us, because you've been with us all night. and I have a feeling you came on primarily for this. So Katina, if you can let us interrupt you, we'd like to hear from you. Okay, and while we're waiting for Katina to maybe join us, Danielle, what are you thinking?
I think it's a great idea for something regional. I think it does potentially require more than one community to be involved so that you can have enough backup to make it affordable for everyone, and to recognize that there's benefit in making it a larger group effort, so that you can make it affordable for each community and take advantage of some, multiple people being on call. There's different models. There's the idea of, cahoots, which is just someone who's not law enforcement being involved. And then there's also kind of the ability, a different model, partnering with law enforcement, so that law enforcement is kind of there as backup, but isn't involved or engaged unless the mental health provider asks for their help. And so I think that's another potential thing to consider as well.
So is that like a hybrid where the police and the crisis team go together to the calls that are dicey in this form of suicide or those other kinds of calls?
Yeah, but that the crisis person would take the lead, and that the police officer would be in the background and only kind of engage if needed. But I mean, the cahoots data speak for themselves. I think there's evidence that in the vast majority of those calls, the police officer is not needed. I would worry about those 150 calls where they do ask for backup, how long it takes them to get it, and if anything problematic happens in the meantime. And then, the legal ramifications of, if you call 911 and you don't get law enforcement, you get this nonprofit, what does that mean legally in terms of the city's liability? I think that's
that was my first thought, Danielle. And when they said that there'd been no death or injury of their own fault, I don't know if that meant there was no death or injury because they couldn't get law enforcement fast enough when they needed it, or just that they played by the rules and there may have been some injuries and deaths because there were no police present. We'd like to tease that out later, right? Because that's really important. Because if that's a pretty good track record where 0.6% actually needed backup, but there never was an injury or death as a result of not having initial police presence. That would be a very strong metric, right? So I kind of cut you off a little tiny bit there. Did you have more you wanted to say, Danielle?
No, I think that's just my initial reaction is that I think to be successful, it would be really powerful to maybe have, such a service for the whole peninsula, for example. I know Salinas is a much bigger community, and so it might require a much bigger project to support them as well. But I don't know if Marina all by itself could handle the cost. Just quick numbers, at $70,000 per social worker for 4.2 social workers to be 24-hour care. I think that's almost $300,000, not counting benefits or any overhead. That seems like a lot for one community to handle. And especially if you wanted some redundancy and a vehicle, it seems regionally to be more feasible.
Yeah, I think you'd probably be pushing $1 million to have 4 different teams, so you could have 24/7 coverage with 8 people or 4 teams, and it'd be kind of like a fire company, and I think it would be approximately $1 million, and it'd be a lot more than that if it was regional, because they'd have to be able to accommodate as many simultaneous calls as possible. So yeah, the regional approach really makes a ton more sense, but it would end up being not very expensive if every city was chipping in their fair share prorated on their population, their budget, whatever that is. So I think that Marina could afford $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And that's a third of the minimums being like $1 million. But we wouldn't. But then we'd have to probably pay more if we were going to try to have. Well, I don't know if we have to pay more, but we might have to pay more if we wanted to have availability when we needed it. But I think maybe that would iron out if we had other cities chipping in too. So yeah, the regional approach you mentioned is definitely there. So let's go to Karen.
I just looked up that the population of Eugene and Springfield combined is 210,000. And so just want to throw that metric out there.
Okay, so that's really interesting because the Monterey Peninsula, Marina to Pebble Beach, is about 120K, maybe a little less, 110 to 120K. And you just said 220?
210.
210. Okay, so it's bigger than the peninsula, but if you throw in Salinas, which is about 150, then we're at 250 if it's Salinas plus the Monterey Peninsula. And then the whole county of Monterey is 440,000, so it's twice as much as that two-city area. But I think it would make sense to be just the peninsula or just the peninsula and Salinas. But then if that left out the South County cities and they wanted to participate, then we just expand the program. So that's really interesting. That it costs 2.1 million and it serves 210,000. So that does make sense that it might cost us, $1.5 million for our 120,000, something like that. Thank you, Karen. Anything else you wanted to say, Karen?
No.
You're speechless. No, okay, Ron Dunlap, I'm going to try to put you on the spot again, see if you're still with putting the kids down to sleep. But being that you're in the fire department and you go on a lot of calls, may or may not be a lot of medical illness calls, maybe you do. But anyway, you've got a much better sense of Marina and the calls for public safety than I do. So I don't know if you heard any of that cahoots stuff, Ron, but what's your thought initially about crisis teams either augmenting or replacing first responders?
It's interesting. I did hear parts of that, so I may have to ask a couple of questions. But yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. If I'm correct, I thought I've seen crisis workers following alongside with PD officers on Friday nights. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think that on occasion the Marina Police Department has a social worker join them if they're going to a call. And what Chief Nieto, our police chief, has told us is that it's a lot harder after hours, so 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. If they need that help, it's a lot harder to get it. So that tells me that once in a while, when I asked her how often do we use them during hours, she said she'd have to get back to me. So that makes sense, Ron, that on occasion you see a crisis intervention expert augment the police response.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it was a good idea. I thought that that was a unique way of kind of trying to get other people aside from officers involved in behavioral health issues and things. So I was surprised to see that. I thought it was a good idea. And I think that was probably about a year ago that I saw them start doing that. Maybe not so much recently, but I thought it was an interesting program that I should keep looking into maybe. As far as from a first responder point of view, I like the cahoots idea. I would be concerned maybe at the 150 incidents where officers were called in. That seems like a small number, but if that's 150 times that maybe the people were assaulted, then I would be a little concerned. I guess I would just want to see some more of those statistics.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Ron, you're a firefighter for the city of Marina. Did I get your job right, or are you an engineer?
I'm an engineer, correct? Yeah.
I'm sorry. So as an engineer in our fire department, what kind of interactions? Well, how long have you been there? How many years?
A little over 15.
Wow, that's a lot. So how often have you come across, as a firefighter responding to a call, a homeless situation or mental illness or something in that realm?
It's pretty regular. Yeah, I would say maybe 10% of the calls
are substance abuse, suicidal, those kinds of mental health issues.
Yeah, definitely behavioral health, I would say, maybe in crisis. We do have several county programs in Abrams Park and Preston Park. And I think occasionally some of those folks out in that area have behavioral issues that they're not able to get a hold of one of the counselors out there on those streets. But yeah, I would say not a lot, but probably 7 to 10% of the calls.
Yeah, that's a lot. So, here's your ignorant mayor question, not question, but I just didn't understand before just now that fire department would be going to these kinds of calls. Why do you go to those calls? Because you can get there quickest, or why?
Well, that's a good question. I think initially when it gets called out with 911 as a behavioral health issue, that it's something that we could try and talk them down to find out is it actual a physical illness or trauma that they're having, and just to kind of get a first responder there. I think to get somebody there quickly to calm them down and to assess if it's a dangerous scenario. A lot of times the dispatch will also prompt us if it seems that the person could be violent. So we'll stage in the area and kind of park maybe a block or two away and wait for PD to come in and make sure it's safe before we go in. But sometimes along with those behavioral emergencies, the officers will put them on a 5150 72-hour hold, in which case the ambulance will transport them to the hospital for that. So I think once 911's activated and it's classified as a medical emergency, then the fire department's activated with them also.
Right. I just didn't know. Is there any training that is available to firefighters or that is mandatory for firefighters for that sort of crisis intervention like work?
That's a good question. We have some online training that we have. We use a program called Target Safety that runs through some online scenarios, which actually ended up being pretty helpful right now with the online training. And as far as any actual physical classes, I think I've seen a couple. We're part of the International Association of Firefighters Union, and occasionally they have some regional seminars and conferences, as well as a new facility for first responder and firefighter behavioral health emergencies. So it is something that's being brought up, I think, more so now. And I would anticipate probably more seminars and classes once everything starts opening up, becoming more common. But at this point, our training consists of mostly the online classes, and generally there's probably about 3 to 5 hours worth of mandatory training each year that we go through.
Right. Well, Ron, has it struck you as odd in the last few months with the national discussion about mental health calls being responded by police, that we haven't heard the mention of firefighters going to those calls?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's probably something a lot of people don't think about. I think when they think of these behavioral health emergencies, that they typically see maybe officers on TV or the ambulance. And so maybe firefighters, it's just typically not known that we respond to those as well.
Well, that's huge, that 7 to 10%. I know that's a ballpark figure. I'm not going to quote you or anything like that, but that's a lot. So yeah, I'm thankful that you're able to help people. And I bet you people are probably less anxious when you show up than when a person with a gun shows up, because they don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, with the enforcement.
Well, we're lucky that we're in that scenario. Then hopefully we can de-escalate it.
Right. And just to compliment our police, I'm not looking for criticism in this question. How have you seen the police interact or handle these kind of cases?
My point of view is I think they've been very receptive and open to it. Like I mentioned earlier, I like the idea that they had the mental health professionals that were riding along with them on Friday nights. I think weekly to come out and do that was a step in the right direction, and kind of shows different ideas and tactics that they're willing to take to try and understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eddie Anderson, one of our 2 commanders on the police department, on last week, I think it might have been, was telling us that the police get some training, but more importantly, especially those that have been around like you've been around so long, but the police that have been around as long as you have, they've gone to so many of these calls that through practice, on the job training, they've gotten very good at de-escalating and talking to people that are having mental issues. So, and that, you know how that is when you do something over and over and over again, it's sometimes better than if you had the classes and you were an academic, as long as you're good at it and you care to learn and improve as you've gone through different examples and made some mistakes. But, you know, not just with mental health issues, but I think it would be similar to you being a firefighter and going to a gazillion calls over the years, that practice is maybe the best kind of training. And do you think that might bleed over into the police practical experience?
I think so. I think you brought up a good point too, that much like a lot of the officers that have been there a while, you tend to run on the same people, especially if they have recurring behavioral health issues. And I think that can be a good thing, that when they see somebody they're familiar with, and it kind of puts them at ease, even though if you ran on that same emergency several times. So I think at least having some of officers that have been there a while, or firefighters and EMTs that have been there a while, has helped out a lot.
Mm. So when you're there long enough, you get maybe first name, or you get familiarity with the repeat customers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some people, maybe we run emergencies on 2 to 3 times a week, so we get pretty familiar with some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know some people that are really grateful to the fire department. Some people that have passed on, that have died over time, but you know, they were in the habit of falling on the floor and they couldn't get up, and
Sure.
you guys would be there, and whenever they needed you, and that could be, like you say, 2 or 3 times a week, and they just bubble over with appreciation and fondness for the fire department coming to help them on a regular basis. And I always thought it was kind of cute, you know, like I fell down again, had to call the fire department, and those are the kinds of people that you get to know on
Yeah, we're lucky. We do have a very grateful and thankful population in Marina.
Yeah. Okay, well, anything else before we take you off the hot seat that you want to say to us?
I don't think so. You know, I think this is the second town hall meeting I've sat in on, but I appreciate you putting these on, and I appreciate you letting me talk for a little bit.
Right on. So let your coworkers know that everybody's welcome. This is just a really nice way for people to talk vulnerably or candidly, and it's so far it's been a really supportive atmosphere, and we'll hope that it stays that way. Thank you, Ron, very much for working at Marina and for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Katina, who I've been trying to get on the spot, says she's unable to talk, but she agrees with Danielle that a regional approach would be a good way to go as far as resources. And she thinks that Chief Nieto did mention there's a behavioral health unit shared between Marina and Seaside, but Katina is not positive about that. So there you go. If that's true, you know, then we already have sort of a model that's already working, being used in Marina. And that might be when Chief Nieto said it's hard to get people off hours. She might have been talking about, you know, that unit not being as available after 5 p.m. as it was before 5 p.m. And Ron Dunlap is still with us. So if anyone had questions specific to him, maybe wiggle your real hand, because you got 3 hands up. So Danielle has a question for Ron. So we'll unmute you, Danielle, and we'll see if Ron can get back to us. If not, it's just because he's checked out doing some other things.
Well, I was thinking about the idea of the embedded mental health personnel, and how that's a different model than Cahoots and something that we've done so far. And I was just thinking in the back of my head, the feasibility of whether it would be useful for that person to be embedded with the fire department rather than with the police department. Obviously, I have no idea the feasibility of something like that, but it seems that if fire is already responding to these emergencies and they are medical personnel who can deal with the medical emergency side of things, might that be an opportunity for someone with mental health training to be in that de-escalation role and not have to engage the police department at the same time if they were embedded with fire instead? So that was just my question.
All right, Ron, on your companies here in Marina, your fire crews that go out to these calls, what kind of medical staff do we have on those engines?
At our airport station, we have 2 people, and at the what we call downtown station, we have 3 firefighters.
Who are on the call or have medical certificates like EMT or paramedic or?
Correct. Yeah. All of us. So all 3 at Station 1 and both at Station 2 are everybody in the department is EMT qualified. Correct.
Wow. So Danielle, are you asking, hey, how about we get one of these EMTs? We're already going out to these calls, and we add to it a social worker who's trained, and there you've got it. You don't have to hire necessarily a new 2-person team. You've already got half that team.
And especially if fire, and this is my naivete, but if fire is already responding, it seems like the fire department is often the first to respond to an emergency situation, many times that, I've just seen in the community. And so if they're typically going to most 911 calls, and maybe they're not, but if they were, it could be a way to kind of separate out that behavioral health person away from the police, which could be beneficial to people who find police threatening.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion. Typically, when we're called out for a behavioral health emergency, it's because either somebody has requested an ambulance, they've either said that they want to go to the hospital, or that they've said that they feel like harming themselves. I would imagine, I'm not sure what the police statistic numbers are, but I would imagine that let's say we have somebody walking in the middle of an intersection yelling, then the police would only get called for that. We typically wouldn't be. So my thought would be, if I understand your question correctly, I think to have them on the engine responding would be a good idea. But I think they probably would get called out more and might be of more service riding with the police, because I think they probably get activated more so on the police side than the fire side. But that would just be my guess.
All right, Ron, let's say that you had a social worker with you and you go to a call, and then you get called another call. You can't leave one of your team. Everybody's got to go, right?
Right. Yeah. And that is a big problem in Marina. We get a lot of back-to-back calls. Thankfully, we have our second station now that could respond to that. But you're right. And it would just depend on how it was structured, I guess. If the social worker responded in a separate vehicle, then maybe they could be left on scene there while we respond to the next call. So I guess it would just depend on how the program was ran.
All right. Hey, I have an unrelated question, Ron.
All right.
You have a second company you just mentioned has made things given us better coverage and given you guys some of the help you needed. How much better would it be for our fire department to have a third company?
It would make
a second company, 7 days a week, second company.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point to mention. At our second station, we only have 2 firefighters, and the preferred national standard is to have 4 on an engine. We've typically had 3 on the engine, and so just as hopefully in the short term, we're trying to kind of help out by running short in kind of a little more dangerous scenario by having less people on there. But yeah, at the airport, so we just have the 2 people instead of the standard of having 3 personnel on an engine, which does make it difficult because one of us has to drive, and then that leaves one person to kind of care for the individuals, or if we're doing CPR and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So did you draw the short straw to get the airport shift, or do some people like it?
Well, one of the problems at our main downtown station is that we share it there with the police officers and with records and admin. And so especially in this COVID scenario right now, I kind of enjoy being out at the airport with less people there, less exposure.
So pros and cons.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Danielle, anything more that you had for Ron? Okay. Kathy and Karen, did you have something for Ron? Raise your real hand, and I just don't want to keep Ron on the hot seat. Kathy, Karen does. So let's go to Karen.
Thank you. Ron said something that probably relates to the 150 calls where Cahoots needed law enforcement backup. And he used the word staging, that sometimes they're staged back from the situation. And that's probably really likely happening with Cahoots as well, that, dispatch knows where calls are going out all the time, and the rest of the department that's not involved is probably staging in the backgrounds of things. So that's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a guess, right, Karen? That's like
that is a guess, but the term staging and as a background and what are the rest of the police officers around town doing at any given time, they're paying attention to everything that's going down. So.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. Hey, Ron, before we tell you to go back to your real life here, tell us what your shift's like. Like, do you work 3 shifts on, 2 days off? You know, what's it like being a firefighter as far as time on and time off?
Okay, so we work a 48 on and a 96 off. So this particular week, I'll go in on Thursday morning, and then we'll work a 48-hour shift. I'll get off on, what would that be, Thursday, Friday? Sometimes our days get mixed up because it changes every week. I apologize. So I would get off Saturday morning and then would be off for 96 hours and then come back. So on average, we work a 56-hour work week. 1 week we'll work 48, the next week we'll work 72. So your question earlier about how it relates with school and I think with having children and stuff, sometimes it's nice, but other times it's difficult. If very typically we'll have several calls throughout the night and then get off that morning, and 8 o'clock we get off, and by 8:30 we're at home trying to get our kids logged onto the computer to attend class. And so sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge if you've been up all night and then coming home to put on a school day. So but then the next day hopefully it makes up for it.
Right. Yeah, I hope when you get home at 8 o'clock, your child doesn't need your attention on math homework or English essays or something.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's great that you're with us tonight, Ron, and I learned a lot from hearing about the stuff that you covered. Kathy is saying, Kathy, you saying goodbye to Ron? Oh wait, hang on, Ron. I think Kathy might want to talk to you. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, and this does kind of relate to what Ron was saying. I just didn't have a specific question. So wanted to, I hear the great idea of Danielle saying, well, maybe we could substitute the police in conjunction with a cahoots or, mental health workers. And it would be great in terms of pulling it away from the police involvement when it may not need that level of intervention. But at the same time, I'm thinking of cost. And I had asked, I think of some police staff about why do we always get the fire engine there too when a police call, and when has nothing to do with anything that might involve a gun. And they said because of response time, that they don't know who's going to get there, and we have to have both, and that's just the way we do. And so that was the answer I got. But certainly the training is different. But I think cost-wise, if you have a mental health worker and you're bringing a whole fire truck, I mean, I just think that that maybe that is getting a little bit, away from the savings that we might have with cahoots. And I think I do favor just the same model as cahoots, because even if you had the cost factor with fire department coming, but the other way, if a police were there, then it's kind of like the minute they see a policeman, whether they're standing a little bit further away, the implication is that a threat of violence could trigger something, and that's exactly what we're trying to get away from. And the whole issue of defunding police, the real initiative is so that mental health and other social work services can be funded alternatively. Not that you're taking away from the police, but to think about that funding in those ways. Because I remember way back in mental health, we did have crisis teams that were mobile. And over time, I have seen the whittling down of mental health services all over this country. And so I think that it's kind of like it's being resurrected for a different need, but it's still the same thing. And mental health has just been slashed, absolutely slashed, whether it's from the easiest things of therapy all the way up to crisis work and the whole thing, and hospitalizations, and it's really been slashed. So I kind of feel like it would be still nice to have this cahoots in a pure form where because there is history to this that shows that it can be done. I would really love to see us try. And I agree for cost effectiveness, we would probably have to ultimately go to a regional basis. But every region, every city is going to have their own set of politics, is going to have their own sense of we want this versus the other. And then I fear that we will never really be able to know if this is possible here. So I'm thinking that if we could just in Marina, just at least attempt to do some form of it, and maybe only do it during certain hours that we seem to have the most mental health calls, maybe something like that, because I think it's a great idea, and I would just be really hoping that we could try something like that. And then because it's mental health, and in this case, the Coots seems like they have the police that are separate from this team, and they work in a nonprofit, so they would know how to handle mental health. And that it would never be now on a police record and that kind of stuff. So I think, looking at confidentiality and the privacy issues, if we're really using them for mental health, whether it's an emergency or not, I think that needs to be respected. So
yeah, I just thought,
thoughts. Yeah.
Sorry, Kathy. Go ahead, Kathy. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So I've been listening to the conversation. These are just sort of a compilation of all the ideas that I've been hearing.
So I thought of a couple of things listening to you. One is that we could take baby steps, just like we're doing with our fire department. Ron was telling us how we have a fire company of 2 people out at the airport who respond to calls with 2 people when the national standard is 4. Normally we use 3, but in that case we're using 2, and that's because that's all we were able to afford to hire, or that's all that we allocated money to fund, was a 2-person fire company, fire crew out at the airport. And so, Ron, I don't think we have that 7 days a week, do we? That 2-person second company? We'll wait to see if Ron can get back on. I'm sorry we keep doing this to Ron. So we'll wait to see if he, there you go. Oh, sorry, Ron, that was me. I muted you accidentally.
All right, there we go. You are correct. So we actually, 7 days a week, we have 2 firefighters out there. There was some discussion of staffing it with 3 firefighters. That would have required the station to be browned out 2 days a week. So ultimately the decision was made to run with 2 firefighters and keep it open 7 days a week.
Okay, thanks. So my point's not as strong that I was going to make, but it's still a little bit relevant that with the fire department, we took baby steps getting to a full-on second company. Right now we have, as you've heard, a 2-person second company, which is not a 3-person or a 4-person, which would be full-on. So we decided to put money to partially move toward a second full company, but we're not there yet. It's partial still. And so we could do what Kathy was just saying. We could spend with the money we have to get started. And maybe it's an 8 to 5 crew. Maybe it's a midnight to 7 a.m. Graveyard crew only, depending on whatever the police chief said was going to be getting us the most help to the community. So we start, like Kathy said, to get the experience under our belt, and maybe we start to build relations regionally and how this could work regionally. But we don't wait for years until the whole enchilada could be employed. We do what we can and see what bang for the buck that gets us. The other thing, the second thing I wanted to mention that I just realized is that if we were to baby step into this social service crisis team, it would theoretically, or it seems intuitively, to be in direct competition with the need we have to put more money into the fire department so that we get up to that 3rd company, because nobody really likes having 2 people on an engine company. As Ron said, it's not the safest. It's not as safe an approach as having 3 or 4. So if we were to go with the recurring expense of a crisis team for social, mental health calls, it's basically going to have to compete for the same dollar that we might otherwise have put toward an expanded second fire company out at the airport. So I hadn't thought about that when I was saying, yeah, we do have the money, we could afford it. It would not break the bank to start down that path of a social crisis team. But it would delay our ability to compete with our ability to continue down the path we wanted to progress with the fire department. So those are the thoughts I had, Kathy.
Could I just say that we just really need, we're trying to do hybrids here with either police or social work or social work with fire, but I think that all 3 of them have very distinct fields of profession, and we shouldn't be trying to combine them necessarily, because, you know, if I think that the type of person that goes into social work or psychiatric nursing or, you know, mental health is very different than the person who wants to be a police officer or a firefighter. And, you know, yes, there are exceptions that I might be a wonderful cop someday, you know, or vice versa. Or, you know, we can look at Ron and say he sounds so kind and gentle and stuff. And so he could be a great social worker someday. But the reality is that there are very different approaches. And I don't know that we should be thinking that one is interchangeable for the other. And so that's why I would like to see what happens if we have a mobile crisis team for mental health. I think that it's not a new idea. It's going to be new in the sense of it isn't with county mental health or that kind of stuff that it used to be, you know, 30 years ago, but money isn't there anymore. And so this is responding to a little different need. So that's kind of another thought I had.
Good, Kathy, good, thank you.
It's my second career, right? It is a cop.
I can see you in a uniform. It'd be a tough one. Nick, did you have questions for Ron? Or it doesn't really matter. Nick, let's give you the floor next.
Yeah, well, Ron actually brought something up with the 2 stations and how he likes it over there due to, you know, the sharing of the downtown station with the police department and the admin office and the exposure risk to COVID. And I just want to know, is there, I'm worried being such a small city, having a small department, what if our first responders get COVID? I did hear that a police officer in the city got COVID. How do we prevent that? What happens? I mean, you're talking about shutting down, you know, a whole team of firefighters. That's going to affect the rest of them quite a bit.
Well,
that's a good question.
First, and then I'll try to fill in if I can. But go ahead, Ron.
Sure. No, it's a good question. I think I'm not sure, to be honest, how it would be handled, I guess, or how it has been handled. We would have to see kind of what HR or the city manager or the chief of the department decided to do. We have been doing our best probably since April. There's been a mask mandate inside the building. And so for our 48 hours, we're in a mask the entire time, which hopefully is protecting us more. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's obviously sharing that building with that many people, there is the greater exposure risk, and it's a concern for all of us.
Right. And the only thing I have to add is similar to what Ron said, that our police chief and our fire chief, especially our fire chief, because they've only got, what, Ron, 10 to 12 guys, 10 or 11 guys, I think. They might have a woman or two. I can't keep track. I'm sorry, I don't know that right now. But anyway, they have 10 to 12 firefighting positions, including engineers, captains, and firefighters. And so they've tried to separate them as much as possible. And that's really all I know. So that would be a good question for the chief, fire department chief, because I know early on, like Ron said, back in April, because this pandemic really kind of hit us in mid-March. So the emergency council of the city, the department heads, the mayor, and city manager, we were being updated by primarily the fire chief with his update of what he was trying to do in case someone got COVID, to not take out all 10 to 12 fire crew, to reduce that as much as possible. But it sounds like it's still a huge concern that if someone came down with it, we could easily lose, 3 to 5 people, depending on who and in contact with who.
Well, yeah, I mean, also just the police department too is not the biggest police department. It's also, and they work closely together. And I hate to say that I see them out on traffic stops and they're not wearing masks and they're dealing with the public. And obviously wearing a mask sucks, but I have to wear it to work all day long. And I just you'd think that they would want to be wearing them or also be wearing them no matter what.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Nick. And thanks, Ron. We had a chat going back to the cahoots. Well, I guess we're kind of still on the cahoots, aren't we? Felt like we were getting off into the fire. But anyway, Jill Hollingsworth came in and then had to leave. Before she left, she put on the chat. You all can see it. Well, maybe not. It's just to me. Got a bug out just wanted to add that I lived in Eugene for 20 years, and the Cahoots was well loved by the community. Reviewed their website and didn't see anything for domestic violence. Interesting, right? They were talking about suicide, substance addiction, homelessness, but they did not mention domestic violence, probably because you got to have a cop for that. But anyway, going on with her chat, realize this is a high risk response, but wouldn't it be great to have a gender appropriate responder? I mean, that might work for a homosexual couple, but if you had a heterosexual couple, which gender would be the appropriate responder? It's interesting. Anyway, just putting that out for discussion, she says, and then she says goodnight. Yeah, so that's interesting that, we haven't talked about domestic violence, and apparently that's not something you want to send. That's not something Cahoots sends their crisis team to without a police officer. That's the inference that I get reading the little bit that we read about the Cahoots. All right, Nick, did you have anything else you wanted to say? All right. Well, I'm going to unmute you just to make sure. Mute.
No,
Nick.
no, I'm good. Thank you,
You're
Bruce.
good. You're good. Okay. Anybody want the final word on Cahoots? Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to find out, is it too early for us to even get somebody from Cahoots, like to come to our town hall or something that we could just ask some of these questions and get a little bit more details? It may be too early, but it seems like so many of us have so many questions that we can't.
I think, good question. I think Kate's willing to try to work that out, coordinate that. So Kate, go ahead, Kate.
Hi. No, I'm not offering to coordinate, but I just have a little bit of information to add that there actually already is a meeting planned with Cahoots, with Community Before Cops this Thursday. So I wasn't in on the Zoom that planned that. I just saw it in one of our chats. So I just wanted to put it out there. It may be possible to have more people attend it. I don't know. I can try to find out.
Kate,
but
Kate, before you give up on that, Kate, can you please try to find out if the public or more people are potentially invited, because maybe we could at least have a few people from Marina.
Yeah.
Like James Fraser, he'd be great to send. He's sitting over there by that oak tree. Go ahead, Kate, whatever else you were going to say, sorry.
I just before joining you all, I was with Monterey's Tyler Williamson hosted a talk about policing issues, and people were definitely interested in this. Cahoots came up. It was pointed out that there is already the what is it called? The MDOT. Where's the right window for this? Multidisciplinary outreach team is something that the Monterey Police Department has, where they have a social worker and they can respond to certain types of calls, especially homeless issues and behavioral health issues. And some people were saying, yeah, this is something that more people need to know about, that they can call. It's something that you could possibly scale up regionally. Other people were saying it needs to not be based in police, and that sort of took the discussion back to the Cahoots idea. There was one person on the call who a few different people were discussing that the recent officer-involved shooting in Monterey might have been somebody who was actually trying to commit suicide by cop, and that, to provoke a shooting so they didn't have to do it themselves. And that's another reason to have something that doesn't involve police responding, especially to mental health issues. And also in Seaside, they are working towards hiring some more social workers. And I don't know the details about that, but that was something that was on their agenda last week. And I had to get off of that call before they discussed it. So I don't know the details about that, but various people are saying that, yes, this could be a regional coordinated effort. You're not the only ones talking about that. And I just wanted to bring that out, and I will try to find out more about the Cahoots call so that you all can find out more too. And the county, a lot of people were saying that it would really be great if it were, there was really an umbrella that the county was working on it. It wasn't just from the various municipalities trying to figure out what to do, but that if it were much more of an umbrella. So I hope that's helpful. Bruce, you're muted.
My dogs were barking. So Kate, thanks for going to all those meetings and letting us know what's going on over there. There's different places, different cities, Monterey, Seaside, etc. If we did this hodgepodge where we tried to piece together wherever this might turn into. I think that's great. And 10 years from now, there's no reason why it couldn't be a new joint powers authority. You know, we have Monterey Bay Community Power, we have the Monterey Waste Management District, we have the Transportation Agency of Monterey County, we have MST doing the buses. We got all kinds of joint powers authorities providing regional services. And so that would be a natural, endpoint for several years of us getting our training wheels worked through, working together on this. And a JPA, that's exactly what it's for, is to provide a service to a region with a board of directors that represents all the members in the region who are using the service and paying for the service. And then you don't have any one city trying to run the show for a bunch of cities, which is unwieldy when that happens. But nobody likes government layers and bureaucracies either. So the downside to a JPA is you got yet another agency somewhere. Go ahead, Kate. We'll try to get you unmuted as soon as possible.
Yeah, in the Monterey discussion, the JPA was definitely something that was discussed, and I just looked, and the meeting with Ben from Cahoots is going to be live streamed on Thursday at 6. I don't know exactly where it will be. There are more details, so we can try to get that to you.
Cool.
But that would be something that a lot of people could probably listen to.
And then who's the host? Is it the City of Monterey?
No, I think that one is Community Before Cops.
So it's a local nonprofit, or just a band?
It's not even a nonprofit. It's just a association of activists.
And that's Thursday at 8 p.m.
Thursday at 6.
6 p.m.
My cat's talking to your dog.
Yeah, live stream Cahoots. So not that it helps that much, but I put it in the chat box. Kate, if you send me, if you happen to come across a link, let me know, and I'll get it out to as many of these people as I can.
I'll try to do that.
I'll do the same. If anybody else gets a link to that, please share it. It'd be great to have a few people from Marina. Anything else, Kate, you wanted to say?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last word. We're almost to the end of our meeting. I mean, we could end anytime, but I guess we've run that issue through. I just want to talk about COVID very quickly. We've had 19 fatalities in the county, up 1 from a day ago. We've had 221 hospitalizations, up 4 from yesterday. We've had 125 new cases in one day. It's pretty high. Now we're up to over 3,300 cases. Marina has had 57 cases, so it's getting up there. Seaside's had over 3 times, well, maybe not 3 times. Seaside's had 169 cases, almost 3 times what Marina has had. Monterey is at 41, so less than Marina. And Salinas area has had almost 2,000. They've had 1,975 cases in Salinas. So 57 in Marina, 169 in Seaside, 41 in Monterey, and almost 2,000 in Salinas. They're testing a positive rate of 8.63%. So almost 9 people out of every 100 that get tested actually are positive for COVID. And if you do get tested, it's just under 3-day turnaround, 2.98 days turnaround. And I find that interesting because when I had mine done at MPC, which is one of the main testing places, it took me June 16th to June 23rd. It took me 7 or 8 days to hear back. And this is what we're being told is at 2.98, or let's call it 3-day turnaround time. Well, mine was a 7-day turnaround time. And that's what you hear nationwide, that these 7 to 10-day turnaround times are rendering these test results somewhat mute, because in that 7 to 10 days, you might be getting a lot of people sick because you don't know that you're positive. And they tell you, yeah, but once you get tested, if you have symptoms, then pretend like it's positive until you know differently. But that's easy to say unless you have to go to work every day and feed your family. And then if you got to stay home for 7 to 10 days waiting for your test results because you might be positive, meanwhile, your kids are there looking to, pay the rent for you to pay the rent and pay the food and utilities. I think a lot of people are just going to wing it and go to work, do what they got to do for their family. And that's why those testing turnaround times are so important, because that's human nature. And so if it really was 2 or 3 days for everybody, that'd be great. Now, the county has the ability for less than a 24-hour turnaround. So the county has its own lab, and they send the most important like first responders, like Ron Dunlap. If he were to make a test, it'd go to the county within a day. We'd know if Ron was positive or not. But for most of us who aren't first responders, it's not the 3 days turnaround. It's probably 5 to 8 days, something like that. So hope none of you have to stay home at work if you get tested, because it's a long time waiting. So that was kind of it, just a short by the numbers update on COVID. But we covered a lot of it about the schools earlier tonight. So I think we're pretty much played out. It's only 9:15, so we'll call it an early night. We've only been on this town hall for 2 3/4 hours. But thank you. We still got 14 people. Oh, someone's just coming in. We'll see who that late person is. It's someone named iPhone's coming in. But anyway, it's been a really good evening again. And we, having 14, 15 people to the dire end is really cool. Because I don't get to hang out with 15 people very often these days. So for me, this is my social outreach. All right. Thanks, everybody. It was a great, so much good input. And it's good to see you, Mr. Frazier. Hope you're enjoying retirement from Marina High School. What's it like being in COVID, James, when you retired?
Well, first of all, a little bit of feedback. I was tested at MPC. Probably a month ago, and I still haven't heard back from them. They said 3 to 5 days by phone if it was positive, and then 10 days by mail if it was negative. And I've still haven't gotten a letter. Not that I'm worried about it, because I'm retired. I'm lucky to have income coming in and not out of work.
Right. Now, James, the paperwork they gave you when you were tested, it had a number to call if it gets to the point where you're at, where you don't get within 10 days. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested, you can give them a call and they'll help you right away, because that's, that you just fell through the cracks. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not right.
We had to write on that clipboard, and my handwriting was pretty scrawly in the car.
You have a doctor's signature. So it's cool being retired during the pandemic. It hasn't really affected you much, because.
No, I was on a 5-month road trip, and I got back on February 28th with 5,000 images to process, and I was planning on holding up anyway. And every time I go on a bike ride in Fort Ord, or I go down the coast for a hike, I end up coming back.
More work at home.
Yeah, more work.
Well, 1 day in the field equals 3 days in the office. So.
Yes, exactly. The same deal.
Don't let that stop you from getting out hiking and biking, though.
Oh, no, not at all.
All right. Okay, everybody, have a really nice evening. Try to catch us next Monday. I'm promising Nick we're going to talk about muscle cars. Good night, everybody.
Good night.